this is my working studio now. I've been working in this studio since 2005. Actually, 2004. Came back from Nova Scotia, and I guess we're working backwards. Telling you about myself, going backwards. I retired from teaching at the Ashcroft Secondary School in 2003 and went immediately that fall to Nova Scotia, to Halifax, and studied for 6 months at the Nova Scotia College of Art and Design, where I studied figure drawing and figure painting. And then came back here in the summer of 2004, and I was working on some little bronzes that we looked at earlier that I had cast while we were out on the East Coast in Truro. So I was working on those outside, and one of the Strata members told me about this room, and he says, "Why don't you work down there, instead of working outside?" So I didn't know about the place at all, and it had been through a flood, and so I had to do some repair work and painted it up, and just kind of moved in. So it's been very good for me for a space to work.
So all of these paintings you've done since 2004?
Oh, these and more, yeah. There'll be maybe, I don't think there's anything here from that far back.
Right.
Yeah.
So you typically sell your paintings then?
I'm surprised when I look back to see how many I have sold. It doesn't seem like I'm certainly not getting any fortune out of it, and very little fame. But yeah, no, I don't. I suppose I've over. Oh, let's see. How many years is that? It's 15 years. About 15 years. I've probably averaged 25 paintings a year. So
wow.
Do the math. And I'm just talking about the big stuff, not these little guys. I have a bunch of small ones that I call palette cleansers, but that I don't actually count. So, yeah, there's about 130 paintings in this studio here, and then a few throughout the rest of the building that you've seen. So yeah, I don't think I don't consider myself a prolific artist, but I do. I have some years when I paint a lot, and other years when not so much. Like this last year, I haven't done a whole lot. 2017 and 2018, when we had the forest fires, this was the best air quality I could find was down here, and so I did a lot of work in those 2 summers. This year, not so much, in spite of the isolation. Many people think it was a wonderful opportunity to, just stay in and work, but there's a different kind of emotion about it that makes it difficult for me. And I've talked to other artists who have a similar experience of not really being able to get going on it. So
interesting.
Yeah.
A lot of musicians are finding this a very powerful, artsy time for them. But
yeah, I suppose if you work on a theme, it presents itself that way. I don't often do thematic stuff, unless it's my own theme.
So before 2004, were you much of a painter or artist, or what?
Well, yes, I actually I went to art school, so I got a Bachelor of Fine Arts degree in Manitoba, the University of Manitoba, in 1969.
Wow.
And then I had about a 30-year teaching career. And I didn't do a lot of work then because of the time and energy that it takes to do that. But I started back doing more of my own personal work in about 2000, 2001, when I was thinking about retirement, which I did in 2003. Partly because I had talked to other people, colleagues that I'd gone to art school with, and a couple of them had been teachers and retired and gone back into doing their own artwork. And I asked them, how was that transition? And they said it was really hard, it was really tough, And that combined with some information I picked up at a retirement seminar where they said, if you think you're going to write the novel, when you retire, or you think you're going to, make that big trip, or you're going to do your artwork, you better start now, to get a start. So I did. I started probably that summer we came home from Winnipeg, 2000 probably, and I think the year may be wrong, but it's about there. And we came back, and there was a CUPE strike, and so we didn't cross the picket line. I had some time at home, and I said, okay, well, that was a good time to start. So I kind of started then. And then, as I said, when I retired, went straight out to Nova Scotia. I had always kind of wanted to go to NASCA. Thought I might take a master's there one time, and was pursuing that track, and then I decided, well, I really don't, what do I, I'm retired, I don't need another degree. So I just applied as a mature student and took my courses, and it was very stimulating, an interesting time too. I mean, I've been in art school in Winnipeg, 68, 69, and at that time, I think all my profs were men. It was all male. The student population was probably 75%, maybe not 70% male. And when I went back to NASCA, 35 years later, the dynamics had shifted quite significantly. With most of my classmates then were female, and a number of the faculty were female. So there's a big switch in the art world.
Wow. So over the course of your art career then, what has been some of the ebbs and flows of what you've done? Or have you generally had the same sort of art style since you started?
I started in my major in art school was sculpture. I was a sculptor. And when I graduated, my graduating year, I won a commission to do a large sculpture on the campus of University of Manitoba, which is still there. I can show you pictures later, then I didn't do much painting then. I did some drawing, and through the years, as I said, when I was teaching, most of the work I did was demonstration work in class. I did very little of my own work, so there was a whole lot of things: painting, drawing, printmaking, ceramics, sculpture, the whole thing. Even some photography. And then when I decided to change my career and go back into being an artist, I decided that probably the best route to go was to go into painting, because you don't, to do sculpture you need all kinds of, what I was doing was welded steel, so I needed, grinders, welders, nothing, and that wasn't going to happen. Or cast bronze, which I could probably still do in some ways. Painting was what I'm going to see if I can put this in some gentler terms, but really the easiest to do in terms of getting material, and with the greatest potential payback, because paintings sell better than sculpture. Paintings probably sell better than drawings. So it seemed like a good thing to do.
Probably a little safer too, if you're not having to deal with grinders and welding and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. But you asked about style, if my style has changed. Mm-hmm. And I think, we'll look at some earlier pieces perhaps, but we were saying all of this is fairly recent. And I think the style evolves, it has to evolve in some ways, but the underpinning of my work is form, to do with, you'll always see there's a structure, some more obvious, but there's always there's divisions that you can see. I admire painters like Matisse, and if you look at Matisse's paintings, you can always break them down into large chunks and then smaller chunks and then the details, but there's always a very solid structure. So that's part of the aesthetic. And I think that's something that lacks in some of the contemporary work. It doesn't pay much attention to the aesthetics or the structure.
So everything that I'm seeing more or less in this particular room has one sort of style to it. Can you, so for example, the painting that we have right next to you here, can you explain what this style is, and what your and possibly what your muses are, or how you came to this as something that you enjoy doing?
I call my style inventive formalism. So what I do is I work with the space, and without giving the whole course here, the parts of art are there's subject matter, form, and content. Basically, those three things. So your subject matter is kind of the idea, like what am I going to? Is it going to be about ecology? Is it going to be about humanity? Whatever, you know, something to the form has to do with things like shape, line, color, texture, value, those formal elements, and structure, and how you put them together is part of the form. And then content is where you, the viewer, comes in and says, okay, well, look at that. So when you look at this, what do you see? You know, what does it mean to you? What do you take away from it? Might be nothing, I don't know. But people will often see, especially with, well, particularly with abstract or non-objective work, viewers will look at it and want to find some meaning, you know, because if you look at something and it doesn't mean anything to you, it's not very comfortable, right? So you start to try to see things in, and you always bring your own experience to it, you know, your background. Your experience is different than mine, or yours is different than Troy's. So different people will look at a non-objective work and provide different content. So my job as an artist is kind of the conduit to give the viewer a chance to, you know, tie it into their own experience, and hopefully make it meaningful.
Have you had anybody come up to your work and express what they believe your work is meaning to them?
Oh yeah, that happens.
Can you give an example of that?
No.
No?
Okay, I'll give one example. It's probably not the most edifying one, but I had some paintings in it was at that time was the cafe downtown, the Central. There's about, I know what year it was. It was 2005. No, it was 2015. 2015, because it's the same year that I was part of a show in New York. So I had these paintings in the cafe, in the restaurant, and there's a fellow in there who likened it to a dog's breakfast. That's what he saw. So, but there are other examples. You know, right now I'm doing these little iPad drawings. I don't know if you've seen them. I post one pretty much every day, an iPad drawing for spring, and I often get feedback on that, where, you know, people will see things, you know, like figures or whatever. Yeah.
You said that you went to New York. What other places do you take your art to?
That particular show was with, and the gallery is defunct now, the Chazoo Gallery in Kamloops, Trish Selmer had, and she organized a show with some cohorts in a gallery in New York, and so we had a group show there. Other than that, I have shown in galleries in Vancouver and Seashell, Sunshine Coast, on Qualicum Beach, places like that, and Kamloops. But I don't have any permanent gallery representation now. So.
One of the other things that I've seen you be involved in is works with especially the Mosaic, with the sister cities.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
Okay, the glass mosaic that we did with Marina and Dan and at the Hub Mosaic Studio was based on a mural that we did in Japan in 2014 to commemorate the 20th anniversary of the sister-city relationship. And it combined that mural with a painting by Kazuhiko Nagaki, who is a Bifka artist. That's what that's about.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what was your major contribution to that particular piece? Because that's something that we're able to go and film and show off. So.
Yeah. Well, I designed it, and I did under the guidance and along with a lot of help with Marina and Dan, and Hiroko worked on it as well. It's my first time I'd done any glass stuff, you know, cutting on little pieces. I think my fingernails are finally going back now. It was a learning experience and a very positive one, you know, and I think it turned out well. But my work on it was to do the design, the underpainting, and put it together. I need to get up and walk around and show you stuff.
Oh, and we'll
Yeah,
do that
yeah. Okay.
after this.
Yeah.
So what artists from the past have you said, I like that type of work, and you've...
Well, there are many. There are many. I mentioned Matisse. I think he would be a major influence. Matisse and Richard Diebenkorn, who was a West Coast, California artist from 50s and 60s, who was also very, very heavily influenced by Matisse. In fact, went to a show at the SF MoMA last time I was in the U.S., 2017, to see a Matisse Diebenkorn show. And there were places where they had paintings from both. And of course, Matisse was working in the, early 20th century, and Diebenkorn like 30, 40 years later. And it was sometimes difficult to tell whose work was whose. Yeah. So I like their work, and as I mentioned, I think probably before we're talking about the structure and formalism, because they're both very much to do with the aesthetic. You mentioned inspiration, and I think inspiration is kind of an overrated word. Picasso said, "When the muse comes to find you, she should find you working." So it's really a lot of it is just a discipline, you know. You just have to start getting the stuff down, and then it, you know, it's a dialogue, you know, the process. So if I put some marks on the paper, I make some, or on the canvas, make some initial divisions, and at one time I actually measured to get golden proportions, the golden mean, the roughly 2 to 3 ratio, right, or Fibonacci sequences and that sort of thing. Now I think it's a little more intuitive, but I mean, or learned. It's more learned, I guess, after doing so many measurements, after so many times, and you kind of know where to put things. And then once you get started putting the marks down, the work, you know, you get this dialogue going between you and the work, and take some stuff out, put some more stuff in, you know.
So what is your process on how you build? I mean, I assume you build your own canvases.
I do, yeah.
And so how would you build your canvas, and what types of materials do you use for painting?
Okay, so I get stretcher bars. I start with a 1x4, and I rip it at a 15-degree angle. So can I stand up?
Yeah.
You don't want to have a ridge here. So there's a, you know, this goes this way, and then your canvas gets stretched across here. Okay. So when you're pushing on the canvas here, you don't get a ridge. You know? So right. So you get these things cut, and then I use my old chop saw there, and my nail gun, and put it together, and stretch the canvas, gesso it, and I'm doing some experimenting now, painting just on plain canvas. Like this is part of the experiment here, and that one over there is been glued onto a backing, because I'm working on an idea for a large piece. And the canvases are four pieces of 4 foot by 4 foot. So in the end, it's going to be 8 feet by 8 feet.
Oh wow!
Yeah. So I want to see how it's going to work, and then I'll glue the canvas onto plywood and build a frame around it. So it's a new process. It's kind of experimental, and I'm learning some things about how the paint reacts on unprimed canvas, and I don't really like the way it reacts, and so there's a good reason for putting 3 coats of gesso on the canvas and sanding it down to get a nice surface, because the paint just kind of sucks into the raw canvas, and it's really hard to get it to liven up.
Right.
So that one is in process. Got a long way to go yet, but you can see what I mean about structure. There's definite lines and areas where certain elements are placed.
Kind of looks like above water, below water.
Yeah.
Cool. What's the type of investment that goes into this?
In terms of money?
Yeah, and money, time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you can, you know, I suppose, put in as much as you want. I mean, you don't want to go cheap and buy the cheapest material, but you don't necessarily have to buy the most expensive stuff. I think I save up quite a bit of money by constructing my own canvases, and it's not just about saving money. But it's part of the process, you know, to cut the wood, nail it together, stretch the canvas, gesso, sand it, and all the while you're kind of developing this relationship with the canvas before you start putting the paint on, you know. So, yeah.
If you had one favorite color,
Ooh.
what's a color that you enjoy to work with? And this could be multiple shades, like doesn't have to be just.
Well, I have a hard time picking favorite of anything, you know.
Fair.
Because I think it's you know, variety is my favorite.
Right.
But I used a lot of blue. There's one time when I was working a lot with Naples yellow, so I guess that, you know, is kind of a base color, and then I would work from that. I don't even have any here to illustrate that because they're older. Like Naples yellow, it's not really a bright yellow. It's kind of well, that little one there at the bottom right.
Can I?
Yeah, you can pick that up, yeah. That would be a Naples yellow kind of start.
Cool.
What I think rather than having a favorite color, I think is knowing what colors to use with each other.
Okay.
And this is one thing that, going back to my favorite artist, one of my favorite artists, Diebenkorn, was he would do the structural thing, and he said he would start with, the first decision that he would make was, do I want a warm color composition or do I want a cool color composition? And once he made that decision, then the rest was just the dialogue. You know?
Right.
So it's an important starting point. A lot of these ones, green ones, and I'd like to talk about those a little bit. Green I always found was a difficult color to work with. It was a combination of things that brought me to this series of green paintings. We had gone to Colmar, which is in Alsace, the northern part of France, to see a work called the Eisenheim altarpiece by Matthias Grunewald. It's from the 16th century, 1516 it was painted. And it had been restored. It was in this museum called the Unterlinden in Colmar. We had been there a couple of years before, and the museum was closed for restoration, so we couldn't see this altarpiece. So we went back and saw that in whatever year, 2017 perhaps, 2018. And I was impressed by the altarpiece thing to start with. And not that I'm into historical, although we do look at a lot of, you know, historical art. There was also a contemporary show at the Contemporary Museum in Colmar by a contemporary artist by the name of Joseph Bay, not to be confused with Joseph Baez, but Joseph Bay. And he had done these panels similar to this arrangement with, you know, two on the side and a long one in between that extended, mostly in a monochromatic. And I was quite impressed with those. So we came back, and I thought I'd like to kind of do something that's kind of like that altarpiece. You know, an altarpiece. You've seen them with they have multiple panels and they hinge.
Oh yeah, and they're all kind of different. One's deeper, one's further out.
Yeah, but they're made to fold in a you know, for different parts of their service. Anyway, and then I came across a whole whack of this Hooker's Green paint. That's the name. That's what I call Hooker's Green, and I don't know why it's called that. Probably after somebody called Hooker. And then I had a bit of this copper paint left over from the mural project that we did in Japan a couple of years before. So I had all these things going on, and I thought, well, I was tried that, and then Grunewald, of course, means green, you know, Grun, and so I did all these pieces with my alter. I call them the Alter Ego series.
Cool. Do you spend a lot of time watching or looking at other people's art?
I spend a lot of time going to museums and galleries, yeah, and looking at other people's art. And of course now everybody's saying, well, you can watch it on TV, online, all these virtual shows.
Yep.
In fact, the art club has a virtual show on now. I don't know if you're aware of that or not.
Yeah, we spoke about it yesterday on our news show.
Okay, and it's one way of getting to see art, but it really is not anywhere near seeing the real thing. So, yeah, I like to get out and look at the art. You got to have that physical,
Right.
physical reality of standing in front of a work and seeing the textures and being there. So, and the experience. If you look at a picture of a painting, say the Voice of Fire that we have in the National Gallery in Ottawa, that several years, probably before your time, that the National Gallery bought for hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's by an American artist, Barnett Newman. In fact, it was painted for an expo, I think. And they bought it, and there was a huge hue and cry about how much money we spent on this thing, and of course today it would not. The National Gallery could not afford to buy it at all. And it's the one you've probably seen pictures of with the red stripe and the blue sides, called Voice of Fire. So if you look at that, in a newspaper, and everybody was judging it by what they saw in the newspaper or on TV, and say, well, my kid could do that, with a paint roller. But if you get into the room and you stand in front of it, it's quite overwhelming. So the real thing, your question was, do I spend a lot of time looking at other people's art? I guess the short answer is yes.
Right.
And I think it's important for an artist to do that.
I spend a lot of time looking at stuff on the internet. And one of the recent things that I see on Facebook and YouTube are those videos of people like tying a paint can to a rope and then poking a few holes in the paint can and throwing it and letting it go.
Yeah.
Do you experiment at all like that, or in any other way, or are you sort of set in the way of how you make paintings? If that makes sense.
I'm going to see how to answer this. I don't want to be judgmental about those kinds of, trickshot art pieces, because I think there is a place in art in art making for chance and control. In fact, a lot of the stuff I do is a balance of chance and control. And I think the wonderful Chinese brushwork and Chinese drawings, with the brushes, it's a great example of a balance of chance and control. They know what they're going to do, but still something's going to happen that wasn't anticipated that can be a wonderful thing too. There's also, I can't remember his name, Zhao, and I'm no good at pronunciation of Chinese names. Saw a work of his in the Massachusetts Museum of Contemporary Art. He uses gunpowder, and so what he does is he puts gunpowder on the floor, and he puts these huge paper, and they're huge, like they're 30, 40 feet long by 10 or 12 feet wide, and then puts weight on top of it to keep it in, and then explodes the gunpowder and pulls out. And he's got this marvelous drawing, and it looks like it was all planned, all executed. So, with tying a paint can to as a pendulum and letting it draw a line for you, I guess is legitimate too. But there are degrees, there's degrees or levels of competence and accomplishment in all areas of art. So.
Talking about legacy, so in another 100 years, when one day, unfortunately, everybody has to go, right? How do you see your paintings fitting into a legacy?
Oh, well, it'll be in the inheritance. It's the estate. So my kids are going to have to deal with it if I don't sell it all before I go. I have a grandson who's majoring in business, so I'm hoping that he'll take it on.
Awesome.
But I mean, right? It's a difficult question. I'd like to say I'm glad you asked it, but I have a lot of stuff now, and like, you know, talking about artwork, and downsizing is difficult to do if you can't sell it, and you can't quit. You know, I've been at this stage now for several years where I'm saying, you know, I got all this inventory. Why would I want to keep, you know, adding to it? And it becomes a problem of storage. But if you're an artist, you can't just quit. You know, and if you want to, you have to keep working. Yeah.
See, that was going to be my next question: is an artist's job ever over?
I don't think so. Duchamp claimed to have retired at one time, and spent the rest of he wanted to spend the rest of his life sitting in his apartment in New York playing chess. But he actually kept working. You know, there's a piece of his, and it's in the Philadelphia Museum, and it's quite a controversial piece. If you go there, you'll have to look it up. You have to look that through a peephole in a wall. And it's this whole installation behind, and it's quite erotic. But he didn't quit, so he said he retired, but he was still working. You know, so
Right.
just behind the scenes. And I think it might evolve. You know, like I haven't done welded steel sculpture for years now, although I really love doing that. But like I said, when I left those facilities, I had no way to do it. Right now, I've got this facility for painting, and it's good. If we downsize and perhaps move from here to a smaller apartment somewhere, I won't have the studio, but I'll probably draw. I like drawing, so I do a lot of drawing. So I can continue doing that. And that's one reason why I've been trying to do these things just on canvas, because it's a lot easier just to store them flat or roll them up than to have them on an 1.5 inch stretcher. You know, they take up a lot of room.
Right. Do you find all of this therapeutic, or is it more of a, I don't want to say job, because that
no, you know, if you'd have asked me that question a month ago, I would have said not really. But I have to say I probably do find it therapeutic, because I think I was having more trouble with this COVID-19 and the lockdown isolation thing than I was admitting to, and I think that's also not uncommon, you know. But in the last few days, a week or so, and when I've started back to doing some work, I think I'm a little happier. So I guess it is therapeutic, but I don't do it for that reason.
Do you find any demand on yourself to have, 20 paintings a year, 40 paintings a year, or you just sort of, as whenever they come out, they come out?
I think I used to do that, but I'm kind of giving myself a little more slack now. Saying if I do 30 paintings one year, I don't have to do 20 the next or whatever. Like
right.
Last year, I think I've got 12. These little 6 paintings here. There's another one somewhere upstairs, I think, or down here, over there. Those 7 paintings I just finished about a month or 2 ago, and I started them last year before we went away. We were away in January with another art trip to Europe. Got back just before the COVID thing hit, so then I finished those up, but I hadn't done a lot before that. Good evening. I'm Royden Josephson. Welcome to my retrospective show called Get Physical. And I may explain the title a little bit as we go along a little later. I think the first painting we're going to look at is one called The Fall, which was painted in 2001. Started in September, and was painted actually before the 9/11 in New York. So it's a little bit, I don't think I'm prescient, but there it is. The next painting we're looking at is called La Ciudad, and it is based on the experience from Mexico City. I don't often or paint from particular scenes from travels, but sometimes elements pop up. For instance, in this one, you will see lots of pink. There's lots of pink in Mexico City from workers. The municipal workers wear pink uniforms as they sweep the streets. Taxis are pink. And of course, the turquoise is also a very popular color in Mexico City. And you will also see a pyramid in there, which could have reference to the Teotihuacan pyramid just outside of Mexico City, which we visited. Okay, now we're going to have a look at some of the work inside. I should mention that the name of the gallery here is the Sidewalk Gallery and the Extension, owned by Angela Bandelli. And I want to thank her for suggesting and putting up this show, putting up with me and putting the show up with me, and also Rob, who owns the building where he manufactures his product, roll gear screwdrivers. If you don't have one, you should get one. Now, this painting, it's not a painting. This is a charcoal called The Graces, and it is one of two charcoals in the show. This is from 2017. After returning from a trip to Sweden, where I have some relatives, and there's a nice little farm there, and these cows would come and investigate. And so I took the picture and then drew them when we got home. Okay? Now we're moving into the Extension Gallery again. In 2017 also, we made a trip to Sable Island, which is described as a little smile of sand in the North Atlantic. And it's famous for its wild horses. There are a number of horses there. I think 200, 400 horses. I can't remember exactly. I mean, it varies anyway over the years, but they've been there. The herds have been there for a long time. The island is not populated by any humans except for research scientists and that sort of thing. Nobody lives there. You can't just go there. You have to have permission. It's a national park now and a World Heritage Site. So these horses are wild. They roam freely in groups. And this painting is called The Diviner. A stallion will have his little family of mares and foals, and they'll fight for their territories like other wild animals. The island has some fresh water sources, but sometimes they dry up, and the horses can divine. They can find water under the sand, and they'll scoop it out until they get a little bit of fresh water. In dire circumstances, they can even drink some of the seawater. That doesn't happen often. A bronze sculpture. There are one bronze sculpture in the show that I have here, and I have two ceramic sculptures that have been bronze coated. This is cast bronze, lost wax method of casting. It was done in Truro, Nova Scotia in 2004. After I left Ashcroft in 2003, went to Nova Scotia College of Art and Design for 6 months, took some work there, and while I was there, made these bronze sculptures. This is one of a series of an edition of 6. Okay, now we want to look at the largest painting in the show, which was done in 2009. The title of this one is The Late Show. Titles are always kind of a tricky thing. They usually almost always come after the painting is completed, as was the case with this one, called The Late Show after a program that I used to listen to on CBC radio. You'll see that it is has a number of architectural elements which are not deliberate. What I mean by that is I start a painting with some mark making and a lot of paint over, and when I see something, it develops into a shape. And so then the theme is developed. In this case, it's architectural, and I hope somewhat mysterious in the painting. Okay, and we will look at this one, which is the only oil painting that I have in the show. Mostly I paint with acrylic. This was done, however, way back in 1965. And I think it might have happened one spring day when I was with a couple of friends in a little house in the middle of a Hutterite colony, and we had some refreshments and decided we were going to do some artwork, and I painted this while the house became an island as the water rose in the springtime, and it's palette knife painting, which I haven't really done anything since. Okay. There's a diptych here called 128 Degrees West and Avalon. It was painted after a trip that when I went to Nova Scotia, we drove out all the way across the country and then all the way back again. And in 2005, when we returned, I painted a series of paintings that were based on that return trip, from all over Quebec, from Ontario, from Saskatchewan, Alberta. But this one was kind of the bookmark of the show, called Journey. Avalon, of course, is the Avalon Peninsula in Newfoundland, and all the way to 128 degrees west on Vancouver Island. The next one that I'd like to talk about, the next series, a series of 3 here, called The Farmer Feeds Us All, which is the name of I call it a guerrilla art project that I have been conducting since 2009. Started with this little image of the farmer on the tractor, which is based on my father, who had a John Deere Model D tractor, and I remember it all very well. And the idea is that the farmer, the motif of the farmer is put out there to remind people that where our food source comes from. And so there are a number of these throughout North America, Europe, Japan, Mexico, that I leave in place, that are little stick-on tractors, the same size as this. They're all done from the same stencil. And if in this particular show, to get physical, farming is a very physical thing, and eating is a very physical thing. We're going to I'm going to donate 50% of the proceeds of any and all sales here to the local food bank. Okay, and just maybe let me get back to talking about the get physical of the title of the show. I was going to explain that. We're all going through this time now where we have to physical distance, social distancing, and we have to resort to virtual openings, which are, I suppose, kind of good in a way, because you don't have to have all the people there and all the refreshments. But at the same time, it's kind of not as good. However, with the virtual being what we're relegated to now, we can still get into a gallery space to physically encounter the art, and that's, of course, the best way to do it. All right. Thank you.